All right. Thank you, Sid. And I want to welcome everyone to our Beyond Project 800 panel. My name's Bill McGavern. I'm with the Coalition for Clean Air. And our distinguished panelists this afternoon are Lauren Faber O'Connor with the Office of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, Shreyas Jutkar with the California Workforce Development Board, Nancy Robles with the California Pollution Control Financing Authority, Eric Salo with Southern California Edison, and Chris Shimoda with the California Trucking Association. And we'll be talking about how our incentive projects need to evolve in California as we make the transition to zero emission trucking. And for this panel, we're not just talking about drayage trucks, we're talking about the whole spectrum of heavy duty trucks. We know we've had some incentive projects that have had a lot of success, but I think it might be fair to say that those have mainly been taken advantage of by the early adopters. And as we have this transition to converting all of our trucking to zero emissions, we're going to need to go well beyond those initial participants and include our small fleets and independent owner operators. So that's going to require some evolution in our incentive projects. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists to make some introductory comments, starting with Lauren.
Great, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
Great. Well, first, I just want to thank CARB so much for putting on this really important forum. We were really excited to see it be planned and the announcement around it because it's just what we need in just the right time and very much in line with the work that we're doing in Los Angeles, in the mayor's office and with the Port of Los Angeles as leaders in the region on deploying clean trucks. We see the partnership with CARB and with South Coast AQMD is extraordinarily important and with immense potential to rapidly accelerate our committed transition to zero emission trucks. Now, the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Garcetti, and Mayor Garcia in Long Beach, actually in 2017, committed to a goal of 100% zero emission drayage trucks at the San Pedro Bay Port Complex back in 2017. And we were really pleased to see the executive order by Governor Newsom last year because it really demonstrates that the confidence, the drive, the ambition is shared across all regions of the state. And one of the things that we've really come to embrace as the mayor released LA's Green New Deal in 2019 is the need for public-private partnerships and more innovative financing mechanisms. Because in LA's Green New Deal, we look at the scope and scale of the challenge as we pursue what we're calling the 5 zeros: a zero carbon grid, zero carbon buildings, zero carbon transportation, zero waste, and zero wasted water. When you look at that scale, we absolutely have to pursue different ways of funding, of investing in that type of infrastructure. And that's been a commitment that is really born through some of the work in the Clean Truck program at the Port of Los Angeles, which I can come on to in a minute, but just to say that the Clean Truck program is an extraordinary opportunity to, from our perspective and from the Port's perspective, to make new markets, to influence that market, but to really drive the zero emission market. And so we have been actively pursuing engagements with public and private entities, with financing entities and large fleets and asset managers to look at this balance of and potential portfolio of incentive mechanisms to accelerate that transition.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Shreyas.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Shreyas Jutkar with the California Workforce Development Board. For those that don't know our department, we're one of 7 departments within the state's Labor and Workforce Development Agency. And I'll start with sharing a thought or an idea for how to improve our incentive programs for clean trucks. My big idea, if I will, is to address job quality and job access through our public investment in clean trucks, including in incentive programs. And actually, I'll focus my comments on drivers and operators, particularly in the port trucking segment of the trucking industry, and even more specifically, the for-hire subsegment of port trucking, where the practice of worker misclassification is most prevalent. And I have some thoughts and recommendations for other industry segments and occupations, such as manufacturing and construction, but I'll hold those for the interest of time. So to start with, just want to say a little bit about why we would make such a recommendation and why it's important. The type or form of employment in the port trucking industry, and again, particularly the for-hire subsegment of port trucking, essentially results in low incomes for the drivers and operators, and places all of the responsibility for truck ownership and associated clean air requirements on these low-income drivers or operators. And in turn, that situation hinders the industry and the state's ability to slash emissions from trucking and achieve important environmental and public health outcomes that are required by state and local rules. And the impacts of this are not just confined to the existing workers or drivers in the industry, but they affect potential new workers, especially those from disadvantaged communities who are looking for good jobs. It affects the industry overall in terms of having to spend on new recruitment of drivers, lost productivity, compliance issues, and of course, disadvantaged communities who bear the brunt of the pollution burden from our transportation sector. And so, I might wrap it up to say that port trucking or drayage, if this is where old trucks go to die, it's also where vulnerable workers can easily get trapped in poverty and indebtedness. So just to say a bit more, the major job quality concern here is worker misclassification and also lease-to-own schemes that really force drivers to keep driving, and they cannot easily afford in terms of time or money to purchase new zero-emission trucks, let alone invest in preventative maintenance. And there's a much, I'll save the deeper discussion of these job quality concerns for any questions that may come up. And I can share later some recent reports that have come out, including one that we commissioned, the AB 398 Climate and Labor Report, where these issues are discussed in more depth. And let me end this segment by just saying, there is a better way. The industry was not always operating in the way it is today. Not all firms operate under this independent owner-operator model, and they can still make money. And so let me turn now to sort of the strategies and how we might actually address job quality. Just very quickly, the strategy here is to, mandate and encourage the right things and prohibit and discourage the wrong things. And we do this already with respect to environmental and environmental equity outcomes, right? We set terms and conditions on the technology that's incentivized, where those new trucks are deployed, how the incentives are deployed in terms of, not used to meet regulatory compliance, et cetera. So in the same way, we need to enact deliberate and intentional measures in order to ensure good jobs and greater access to good jobs. Good jobs don't just magically appear. And also, it's really important to note that quality jobs are not just important for workers in the industry. If we really want to address economic equity, we need to make sure that we're paying attention to job quality. And so let me just wrap up by saying, what the specific recommendation might look like. These are just preliminary ideas. They're high level, and so a lot of detail still needs to be worked out, of course. But I'll start with the baby step. The baby step, in my opinion, is to prohibit clean truck incentives from going to firms with outstanding labor judgments. The state labor commissioner maintains a list of such firms pursuant to Senate Bill 1402. And any firm that hires or uses a firm on that list is jointly liable for unpaid wages, unreimbursed expenses, et cetera. CARB could set an even higher bar. You could prohibit incentives from going to firms with repeat violations of labor and employment laws. Agencies like some of those in the state treasurer's office, the Calcap tax credit program that GoBiz runs, several agencies already at least screen for past labor and employment law violations. And to address the high level of indebtedness that happens in the industry, you could prohibit incentivized trucks from being involved in a lease to own scheme, like the South Coast Air District has considered doing, and I believe has actually at least adopted that policy. I don't know that the sort of full rules and regulations are in place for that. So again, I'll just end here by saying we at the Workforce Development Board are here to be a partner in thinking through these kinds of recommendations and implementation strategies. So CARB and the industry, you're not alone. Please come to us. We're happy to provide more advice and recommendations so that, again, we're addressing job quality as well as increasing the likelihood of achieving our environmental and environmental equity outcomes through clean truck incentives. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for those insights, Shreyas. Let's turn to Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Robles, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Pollution Control Financing Authority. It's CPCFA. And if you haven't already guessed, with that huge long name and that acronym, we are a state agency. We're in the State Treasurer's Office. And within our organization, we do several things. Number one, we issue green bonds. We have a Brownsfield cleanup program. But most importantly to this conversation, we do run a heavy duty truck financing program that CARB funds. So CARB funds this program, and then we administer the loans. We have 47 lenders in the community that make these loans, and they are for fleets of 10 or less. So we really are hitting the small population. And it's been a very successful program. We started that program in 2009. Last year, we helped fund about 4,400 trucks. And since 2009, it's a little over 30,000, almost 31,000 trucks. So this program, it was an early adopter program, and it was meant to assist truck drivers to purchase vehicles that met the state's emissions requirements, and also retrofits and trailers were included in that. In addition, we also run an EV charging station program with that, which is funded by the CEC. And this also is for small businesses so that they can develop the infrastructure that they need for electric vehicles. Within the program that we run today, we do zero emission vehicles. That is part of the program. So there actually is a lending program out there today that will do zero emission vehicles. And I heard earlier in an earlier panel that seems to be a challenge, and that's one of the things that we are really hoping to accomplish in the years to come, is to evolve that infrastructure process.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. Next, we'll hear Edison's perspective from Eric.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here. My name is Eric Salo. I lead SCE's electric vehicle strategy and new program development team. Our relationship with ARB is fantastic, and really appreciate being part of this panel and helping share some of the insights. California has some pretty aggressive goals when it comes to electrification of vehicles, not even thinking about the Project 800, but beyond that. SCE has done some strategic work looking at what it's going to take for California to get to the emissions goals by 2045. And in our Pathway 2045 research, we're forecasting that we need about 280,000 medium duty vehicles and an additional 23,000 heavy duty vehicles. And that's just by 2030. Out to 2045, that number goes up even more. And so the scale here is extremely large. And SCE really views itself as a significant partner, even outside of the financing realm, but in an infrastructure, as an infrastructure provider, and providing research and education to these customers. About a year and a half ago, SCE launched its Charge Ready Transport program, which is a several $100 million program to provide infrastructure to these types of fleets for medium and heavy duty vehicles. To date, we've had applications for around 1,400 new vehicles at about 73 different sites. Now, this is just a drop in the bucket compared to the 8,500 vehicle target that we want to get to by the end of the 5-year program, as well as the numbers that I previously stated when you go out beyond the end of that program. But very hopeful and lots of movement happening there from the infrastructure side with regards to funding, et cetera. SE also plays a really important role in providing inexpensive fueling rates. So we introduced at the same time as this program 3 new rates specifically targeted to commercial electric vehicles. And one of the big barriers that we saw in talking to customers was the idea of demand charges. So this extra cost on top of the amount of energy you're using based upon the degree to which you're pulling from the grid. And so what we did in these rates is we eliminated those demand charges, which has deviated from previous rate making activities that we've done, but we've eliminated that for 5 years in order to help ease in and lower the cost for customers to adopt or initially adopt vehicles into their fleets. And then over time, the plan is to gradually increase those demand charges, because actually, when you have a large fleet, it actually benefits you to have demand charges. But we're just not at that state right now, and we're seeing this as a way to incentivize adoption. And on this call with ARB, I would be remiss to not talk about the low carbon fuel standard. And this is a phenomenal tool that I don't think enough fleet or trucking operators really understand or are in a position to leverage. Just to give you an idea, when you fuel with electricity as opposed to diesel or gasoline, and you're operating a heavy duty truck, you could have the equivalent of 30 cents per kilowatt hour from the credits that you generate and then monetize. So what that means is, with the rates that I previously mentioned at, let's say, 20 cents on average per kilowatt hour, and then the benefit from LCFS at 30 cents per kilowatt hour, these fleets can actually make money on their fueling by charging with electricity. And so it's information like this and policies and programs and activities like this that we really hope to promote and educate customers on in order to achieve the very aggressive goals that we have in the state. And SCE is not going to slow down with these programs, and we're going to continue to help provide infrastructure and educate customers to advance these goals in the state out through 2030 and beyond. So looking forward to the questions that are going to be coming up and the rest of the panel.
Thanks a lot, Eric. All right, Chris.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to the ARB for the invitation to participate today. So I'm Chris Shimoda. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the California Trucking Association, and just want to do some context setting about the industry and sort of frame the challenges ahead. And so first, who really makes up the trucking industry? I'm sure most people on this webinar, unless you're in the industry, don't spend much time thinking about who is actually in trucking. And so the average person may think of the delivery vans they see going down the road every day, UPS, Amazon, or FedEx, and may think that the industry is, just made up of a bunch of big companies. But the reality is, most trucks on the road, the vast majority of the industry, is actually owned and operated by very small, predominantly family-run businesses. The stats are that roughly 96% of the industry are companies that run 6 or fewer trucks, and 90% of the industry run fewer than 20. And since it got raised, I'm just going to address, as far as, we do have about half of the trucks in California operated by this owner-operator category, where you could consider it 3 or fewer trucks. About a third of the trucks on the road are run by single truck owner-operators. And just, I think this is representative of the industry as a whole. I've met and, discussed with a lot of these, folks who they are and why they're in the business. Very independent, entrepreneurial minded folks, who typically had been employed by a larger company, take a little bit of capital, which is not really easy to do these days, and start their own business. that's really, sort of the nature of the industry. A lot of my members, even the larger ones, mid-size fleets, all start with one truck and then you sort of build up. There's not like, venture capital coming in and starting, new tech firms. It's a very mom and pop, family, working class, independent spirited sort of industry. And so that's just the nature of who you're dealing with when you're talking, strategies to deal with the trucking industry. You got to remember the industry is very much dominated by these, smaller mom and pop players. And so we need to be mindful of things that are going to work for that segment of the industry, because you get out of the large corporate entities very quickly when you start talking about a number of trucks you're trying to convert. And so, second, I just highlight that this is really not our first go around with upgrading equipment. Since 2008, from a variety of, Air Resources Board rules, truckers have been upgrading equipment from, these older non-controlled engines to predominantly the EPA 2010 and newer model year engine. And so we have, models for having to have done accelerated turnover before. And I'm going to put a big plug in for Nancy's program, the finance through the Calcap program. It's been instrumental in getting truckers, especially these smaller business entities, into this equipment. And just as an example, let's just use the last turnaround at the ports as an example. We had, roughly in the 2008 timeframe, a very short period of time to change the industry from a model that was reliant upon the oldest, possible trucks in their like third use cycle to really brand new equipment. And so what that took is, what we found, it had to be a mixture of public grants. There was a lot of public support, just in straight buy down grants. In addition to, we were coming off of a period where, if you think back to the 2010 timeframe, it was the Great Recession. People, largely these smaller business entities and a lot of folks had destroyed credit from, everything that happened with subprime mortgages. And so it was very difficult to get capital to be accessed by these smaller entities. And so that's where this program that I'm not even going to try to attempt to do the acronym, that the Calcap program, stepped in and sort of allowed private lenders the ability of taking on some more credit risk, sort of profiles that they ordinarily would not have been able to do, in the free market. And so those sort of programs that were put in place to support the last transition, I just say we learned a lot, I think, about what works, what doesn't, but definitely, we would put in a strong plug that I think it's going to be a lot of what we've already deployed, but a lot more resources put behind these programs, some smart policy changes to maybe fix things that we realized didn't work quite as well the last go around. But we've got a lot of great programs such as Calcap to, help us get there. And I just say, obviously we do have experience with a equipment turnover, but this is going to be a whole different ballgame, as I think, the rep from Edison mentioned and everyone is talking about. The last go around, we were deploying, existing diesel technology, much more expensive and brand new, but not the sort of sea change in equipment that we're really talking about today, where from a cost standpoint, zero emission capable vehicles are going to be generally 2 to 3 times more expensive than a brand new diesel. We're looking at, as was mentioned, this infrastructure requirement as well. You can't just go down the street to get a, gallon of diesel. You're going to have charging infrastructure and, financing mechanisms to pay for those as well. You're going to have to marry weird timelines for infrastructure delivery versus how grant programs work. So there's a lot of, I think, sort of scalpel level policy that's going to need to be discussed, where things are going to need to be altered to sort of work in this new environment. But also I'll just, as a reality check, I just, need to say, I know the focus of this panel is sort of how we're going to make it work for these smaller entities. And we do need to be concerned about that and figure that out. We're at the very beginning of this transition where, even the largest and, medium-sized firms still haven't really figured out how this transition is going to take place. And even sort of the best duty cycles, so to speak, for this equipment is they're still working out the very initial deployments on this. And so just as a sort of, reminder, we got to figure out how it works for, those entities before we're really ever going to figure out how it's going to work for the smallest business entities among us. And so, just I'll end by saying, huge plug for, programs like HVIP and Calcap. We just need more resources. That's really the biggest focus, is we're under-resourced on all of them. So looking forward to the discussion.
Well, thanks, Chris. And I thought those were very substantive comments from all the panelists. And building off a lot of the comments about the existing incentives, and I think probably all of us agree that we need more resources into those. I wonder, does anybody think that there should be some changes incorporating into the existing incentives like Calcap and HVIP?
I'll go ahead and start. I definitely think that we could use some change in the programs. What we need are some additions, and just some of the ideas that I've been discussing with CARB and CEC and Port of LA are tax incentives. It was, I'm a recovering banker. I make loans. I know how to do that. But I'm still learning every day, even though I've been with this program for over 10 years, I'm learning every day what it takes to purchase a truck. And I know that even if there's a grant for one of these zero emission vehicles, let's say that, this vehicle costs, $300,000 and they get a $100,000 grant, they're still paying tax on the $300,000. So a tax exclusion program has been brought up to us to help try to figure out, which is something that we're very interested in doing. And of course, with everything I say and every idea I have, it's underfunded. There is no funding for it. We also talked about insurance. The insurance on these vehicles is going to be a challenge for these small business owners. So I do know that there is some federal legislation out there, and it's called the Clean and Sustainable Green Bank Accelerator. And should that pass legislation, it will award green banks in California funds. And CPCFA is an established green bank. And with that designation would allow us to receive those funds and develop different types of programs, including grant programs for great causes such as this. So I'm very hopeful for that legislation, and I may have sent some of you a support letter to sign for that. The treasurer certainly is in support of it, as the Green Bank of California.
Well, thanks, Nancy. And on the subject of taxes, there is potential state legislation to bring about tax parity for heavy-duty trucks, because right now, of course, we know that the zero-emission trucks have a much higher sticker price, and therefore the sales tax on those trucks is much higher than it is to buy a diesel truck. So the idea is, let's reduce the sales tax on the zero emission truck so that it's no higher than it would be for an internal combustion engine. So there's some folks working on that, and I hope that bill will be introduced this year.
Yes.
One thing I just on the comment that you made, I mean, those are, I think, recommendations and observations that are made and supported by a number of stakeholders. What we're just those that we're involved in Los Angeles, whether it's the Sustainable Supply Chain Advisory Committee that Mayor Garcetti and Mayor Garcia and the ports of LA and Long Beach together manage and run with stakeholders across the supply chain at both ports, with labor and environmental justice advocates. Together, they have made those similar observations and recommendations. And then also the Transportation Electrification Partnership, which is a regional partnership in Southern California, run by the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, that includes our cities, ports, metros, AQMD, CARB, have also recognized those particular challenges in the heavy duty sector.
Thanks, Lauren.
And Bill, I'll just say on the tax issue, I think something, sort of important, especially if we have any local government audience on the line, is, we're really having sort of a messaging struggle right now where, yes, there are going to be all of these, fairly expensive zero emission trucks being purchased over the next decade, to try to support this transition. And that does translate into potential higher local sales tax revenue, but what I think, all the folks who are working on this sales tax parity idea are trying to get across is, really the sales tax revenue that you would have expected from a brand new diesel is still going to occur. It's just we're trying to throw every policy tool that we possibly can at making the economics positive for these zero emission vehicles. And so, it may be a temporary reduction in a potential windfall, but really there's no actual, loss if we were the status quo of just brand new diesel vehicles being purchased from those sales tax coffers. And so we're just going to have that communication need, and Lauren, to the extent that the mayor's office can be helpful with his colleagues and communicating some of that, it's going to be very helpful because I think the other issue that Nancy touched upon is the grants themselves are actually subject to income tax as well. And so we have, sort of a circular money, the money's just going in a circle in some of these instances where I think the policy of the state is broadly to support zero emission deployment. We just need to sort of identify some of these things that don't really make sense, try to bring the cost burdens down as much as possible for those early adopters.
Well, I like it. We're coming up with solutions. I want to turn now to a question that was submitted by one of our audience members. How can incentive programs be designed so that independent owner-operators and small trucking companies with limited capital can receive financial support for the transition to zero emissions?
Well, I'll start and feel free anybody to jump in. So, the last go around, the ARB actually did specific set-asides in things like, it was like the Moyer VIP program. I believe HVIP has maybe not a fleet size participation cap, but a total number of trucks you can get financed or get incentives for. And then also the Calcap program is tailored towards smaller entities. And so generally speaking, these programs are designed to help the smaller fleets get into this equipment. It's just with this particular transition, we just need to recognize it's a little bit like the debates that have happened on light duty, where, I know there's a lot of consternation about, wealthy people buying Teslas, sort of advancing the zero emission market. By default, we're going to have the bigger, more well-capitalized folks driving the early years of this transition. But I think the state already has these programs tailored towards, as that transition is happening, making sure that the public incentives are, sort of more proportionally going towards the smaller folks who are going to have the greater difficulty.
Thanks. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in as well. One of the other purposes of Calcap doing the program for trucking is to also, reach our lending community and drive down the perceived risk of making this type of loan, because that is a real factor out there with lenders. They call it rolling stock for a reason. It rolls away, and they want to make sure that, that people pay their loans. But by making the loans that we're making and collecting the data that we do, we can help drive down the perceived risk and also the cost to some of these small borrowers.
Thanks,
Yeah, and
Nancy.
I'll add a thought that I think is a little bit beyond the question, but speaks to it, which is thinking about how to share the cost more widely. I think if there are requirements on retailers that the goods that they're selling must be where we need to account for the emissions from the transportation of those goods. If consumers are also not always looking for a cheaper and faster product, but actually willing to pay for what we need, then I think again, how we do that, of course, is a big question. But I think it speaks to an issue in this industry, which is the cost falling on independent owner operators for the responsibility of purchasing a truck and maintaining a clean advanced technology vehicle, when the benefits are much more widespread than that. So a greater understanding and distribution of those costs and benefits, I think, particularly the costs here, would be really helpful.
Well, it's a great point, Shreyas, and I will add from an air quality perspective that the benefits of goods movement really accrue to people across the United States who are receiving the goods that come in through the California ports, but the burdens are disproportionately concentrated on the communities that are downwind from those ports and rail yards and distribution centers and freeways. And so that's an inequity that we really need to redress. I'm going to go to another question from an audience member, and I'll direct this initially to Eric, and if others want to chime in, go ahead. How can incentives to develop charging and fueling infrastructure be provided to property owners and managers that rent facilities to freight companies?
Yeah, I think, starting out looking at long-term change, since, we're not really looking at these big changes in 2022, but, looking out to 2030, 2040, code change for new infrastructure development is going to be really key and important to lowering the installation cost of that eventual infrastructure that's going to go in. So making sure that there are enough conduit runs, spaces on the panel, transformer sizes at the sites when they're built, that's going to be really important long term. In the near term, programs like SCE's Charge Ready Transport program accrue to the property owner. And so can be initiated by the leasee, but really the infrastructure is with the property owner. And so that's a challenge and a disconnect, but we saw the same thing with energy efficiency programs and improving lighting systems. Now, the dollar signs and the cost of those improvements for the leasees was a lot smaller than putting in charging infrastructure. But in reality, at distribution warehouses and places like this, leases are not coming in and out. I'm sorry, leasers are not coming in and out, every single year. They're staying there for 5 years at a time. And so there's enough space there if the expectation is that they will be using EVs or they will be converting to EVs to put in that infrastructure. And then there's also an embedded incentive to stay at that facility. So this infrastructure could also be a benefit for the owners of those warehouses or distribution centers, what have you.
Excellent, thank you. Lauren, can you tell us about what you're working on with the Port of Los Angeles on clean trucks?
Sure. I really appreciate some of the earlier comments, and particularly the last question about the smaller owner operators and issues of equity. The port is a proprietary department of the city of Los Angeles and a significant economic engine, not just for the city, for the region, for the country, and then, extends globally. And so there's significant opportunity and a lot of responsibility that we carry with regard to relieving the pollution burden of communities that surround the port. That is a top priority of ours. And the port can be a significant facilitator of, hastening that transition and has a, responsibility to do so. So, we set out this year as moving toward the implementation of the Clean Truck Fund program, the Clean Truck program. We set out to really look at how can we streamline some of these efforts? How can we streamline some of the funding? How can we address some of the concerns that have come up around, what is accessible to drivers because of the high cost, the high comparable cost of zero emission trucks? And so in September, we actually hosted a clean truck program summit or forum that gathered about 100 stakeholders who are either fleet managers, as I mentioned, some of the potential participants like investors, I'm sure Nancy you're familiar with, and truck manufacturers, fleet managers, and so on, as well as drivers, on what the needs and possibilities are to create more of a holistic program that can address equity for drivers, that can address in terms of the getting to cost parity and creating more accessible assets in terms of the trucks and accessible infrastructure. And so in October, we then released an RFI, a request for information, for the Clean Truck program, and recently closed that RFI, and we're looking at the significant amount of responses that we received to address a number of these issues and look at how can we combine increased access through the leveraging of the Clean Truck Fund, that is populated by the rate that the ports will be implementing on our dirtier trucks, how to leverage those dollars that are coming to the port. We know those are going to be insufficient to fund the transition, but they're still significant and can have a lot of impact. But how do we grow that impact? How do we leverage it? How do we make sure that we're not just using the fund on its own? And who are potential partners, public-private partnerships that we could that we can look at? What are some of the best solutions, the most creative solutions that the private sector or others might be able to offer? And so that was the goal of the RFI. And we're seeing, some really exciting, potential proposals or, kernels of ideas for us to follow up on. And each type of, potential model for a program that can maybe roll in access to vehicles and charging infrastructure to local maintenance, all of these things, there's different ways to go about it. We see some great pros and cons to different types of models. So we will be engaging in some serious conversations with potential partners over the coming months to see if, as we implement the Clean Truck program, can we do it in a way that maybe builds on the experience that folks have had, but then brings it to, as what we're all saying here, another level in terms of funding, in terms of the ability to access the funding through a number of different potential models. We heard during the forum, whether that's leasing, renting, things that bring the vehicle cost down to what drivers are accustomed to seeing and are able to stand, frankly. And that's our goal, because what we want is the port to remain competitive and not just competitive, but a leader in its field, while also demonstrating globally this transition. And so that enables us to also work with other partners. So another thing that we're doing with the port is engaging other cities and other ports from around the world through the mayor's chairmanship of the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. And so beginning to launch a green ports forum with key ports around the world to look at all of these supply chain issues. And I anticipate that the opportunities and potential partnerships around trucks will be an area of common interest globally.
I have a follow-up question, Lauren, because you mentioned the clean truck rate, and this came up on the last panel also, and this would be a charge on dirtier trucks, which would become a fund for incentivizing cleaner trucks. And as you know, this rate was actually supposed to have been in effect for a while now and was delayed by the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. So when is it going to start?
Yes, so it was provisionally approved at the $10 per TEU rate in March. And in fact, I think that was the last public space I was in was for that hearing. So, a little eerie and a little daunting, but certainly that, the implementation of that rate was delayed, and we were hoping to have it start in the latter half of last year, faced a significant amount of challenges. But of course, we are fully moving ahead. There are still some decisions that need to be made, some very key decisions that need to be made around the structure of the rate. And actually, the RFI has intended to help inform us on some of those really important structural decisions. And so now that RFI is closed and we're looking at the kind of the realm of possibilities and the role that the rate can play in delivering those types of models, that is what we've been, that's one of the factors that we've been using in finalizing the structure.
Well, I'll just say that there are some of us who are eager to see that rate go into place.
Completely understand, and it's totally appropriate, and make no mistake, that is, we're fully committed to implementing the rate, but we also didn't want to just assume a business as usual approach, and really needed to look at the state of technology today, the state of policy today, and the opportunities for a more innovative application of the rate.
All right, I wanted to get back to Shreyas, and I know that you talked a little earlier about the jobs report that you put out pursuant to AB 398. And what are your thoughts about how incentives can help generate high quality jobs for Californians and protect the interests of the goods movement workforce?
Yeah, so there's really two sort of main strategies for addressing jobs. One is to encourage, incentivize more of the good practices, and the other is to sort of close off the low road. And so the recommendations that I had shared earlier in my remarks were really about closing off the low road. And again, these are both important elements to addressing job quality. To go beyond, sort of setting some minimums and really setting a floor to really help generate high quality jobs. That's going to involve, and I'm going to I'll focus on what CARB can do since we're here in this forum today, but please know that this is not the only thing that needs to be done, but just to, focus our attention a bit. I think, again, there are different sorts of job quality standards that could be attached to incentive programs, and we need to be deliberate and intentional about that. I think I said that before, and I'll just reiterate it again that, good jobs don't magically appear. The industry is mixed. Some jobs are good. Some employers are doing the right thing, but not all. And so, incentives could also be targeted to, employers who make a commitment to wage and benefit standards. We could set responsible employer standards on the companies that are able to take advantage of the incentives that are made available. There's, again, a lot of detail to what those kinds of standards might look like. And that's really the work of our department, and the work that I do with other agencies is really thinking about, for the particular industry and occupations, for the type of incentive program or funding mechanism, what's the right mix of job quality tools to address this. So again, incentives can really, again, go beyond and ask for, firms to actually make commitments that they're held to when it comes to, pay and benefits, hours and fair scheduling are other, I'm sure, important issues to drivers in this industry. And so, when we think about job quality, it's more than just wages and income, although of course that's a very significant aspect of it. So those are some quick thoughts and ideas. And of course, I think this is really ripe for some good discussion amongst our panel here. So curious to hear other folks' thoughts about this.
Hey, Bill, is it okay if I jump in real quick on that one?
Yep.
So, I just wanted to urge, folks considering policy changes, because I know that's a part of the discussion, is, to sort of think about the practical realities of, where some of these decisions are made in terms of financing and grants, and, in the case of Calcap, loan loss reserve determination, And really, if you talk to a lender, what they'll say is that the more complicated the program is, that is, in this instance, buying down some of the purchase costs, because they're having to determine, okay, well, what amount are we going to finance? What is the possibility that that amount goes into default? The more that, for instance, because right now there are some instances where they'll assume that the grant amount is going to come through, and then the grant recipient is actually on the hook for paying back that piece to the lender when the grant finally comes through, because the timing doesn't always work out, right? So the more risk that you inject into some of these programs and the more red tape, the less likely the financing people are going to want to touch a lot of this stuff. And that's actually one of my messages, overall for these programs, is the simpler we can make it and focus really on what the primary objective is here, which is deploying zero emission vehicles as rapidly as possible to meet the executive order and the other, sort of policy overlays of the state. I would just, encourage folks to think about, the more ornaments you put on the Christmas tree, the less likely these programs are going to be successful, because the practical reality is you start putting chilling effects on people even wanting to lend the money based on, the guarantees of this program, if the likelihood of default is, goes higher. Because you've put 30 different potential audit requirements that could pull back those funds at some point. So just a encouragement to, let's try to keep things simple, and we're always happy to engage with some of the folks on the labor side about discussions on that end. I could give a really long dissertation on trucking deregulation, but we don't have the time to go into some of that. But just we need to keep some of these programs as simple as possible. The more we weigh them down, the less effective they become.
Right. I'd like to, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. When we are in negotiations for these types of programs, those are some of the things that we think about. And as much as I, appreciate quality jobs and would love to, implement that, the reality is most of the loans that we make in our program are to independent owner operators. So I don't know how you would, evaluate the quality of one person's job who, his sole mission is to drive. And with the larger entities, I could see that not being a floor, but an additional incentive. However, as a state agency, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, with additional requirements comes additional auditing and, staff time and, actually resources that we just don't have and can't get. So as much as I truly appreciate quality jobs, I think Chris is right that if it's not simple, it might not happen.
I think it won't happen if we don't try either. And I would just add that I agree with the point about resources. As a department within the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, our Department of Industrial Relations, the Labor Commissioner's Office, they are chiefly responsible for the enforcement of our labor and employment laws. So there's still a and it's, I'm sure, underfunded. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but if we think about what gets funded in state government, enforcement activities, I'm sure, are usually towards the lower end of things. We think we've made some great strides when we adopt a new policy or regulation, and typically we don't think as much about accountability and compliance, so to say. So I agree that the resources need to be there to make this happen, and also that in terms of thinking through the how complicated this is, it really is going to involve sort of a many people coming together to figure this out. And I would just sort of I guess say again that we need to be addressing our multiple state objectives and policy goals. We already do that to an extent when it comes to addressing environmental equity. We've, I think, decided as a state that the transition to zero emission vehicles and a zero emission transportation system should not be exacerbating environmental injustice in the state. And I think it should also not be on the back of workers. And we need to figure out how to do that together.
Thanks. I wanted to open up a new theme, which is that for 4 years, we've been used to having to do what we can in California without any help from the federal government. And in fact, when it comes to clean transportation, we've had a lot of obstruction from the federal government. And yesterday, New Hope arrived. And we have new people in charge and coming into charge of not only EPA, but Department of Transportation. And I think President Biden has made it clear that the environmental justice is going to be a theme of his administration. And he's put people across the government who are going to be working on climate issues, which, really no president of this country has ever done that. So I'm wondering if our panelists think that the federal government might actually help us incentivize this transition to zero emission trucks, and what form might that assistance take?
So, one thing I can say is share in your sort of remaining glow from yesterday. But, just last week, Mayor Garcetti met with Gina McCarthy, and it was a really good meeting. It was everyone was, had to spend the time getting just really excited to see everyone again and work in this new capacity again. And it was funny because the mayor was sort of remarking that for the last 4 years, we've been so conditioned to just either be in a, be in a relationship that is kind of abrasive or arm's length at best. And that's just sort of been the MO, and kind of forgetting, gosh, what is it like when you can call up someone that you have worked with for a long time or have mutual respect for, share common goals, and go, this is what we need, or this is what we can do, and then have the response be, great, how can we get you those resources, or this is how we're going to do it, or let's plan, let's get these people, together. And that was what that meeting last week was all about. Was just a reminder of what's to come. And between the leadership in the Domestic Policy Office, Domestic Climate Office, National Economic Council, Security Council, DOE, DOT, it is an embarrassment of riches at this moment in time. And of course, it remains to be proved out, and we have to hold the new administration accountable. But it's really exciting to see, as you say, how much climate and economic opportunity through climate action is at the forefront of President Biden's platform. And so the way we're really looking at it is, through the infrastructure proposals that we anticipate moving forward, and being able to demonstrate how the zero emission truck program and the zero emission truck goals of the state of California, of Los Angeles, fit directly into that and meet the racial and economic justice goals, meet the climate, greenhouse gas goals, meet the economic development and job creation goals, with a lot of the we know that the administration shares a lot of what, Shreyas, you were saying in terms of what kinds of jobs are we aiming to move toward and create or support and maintain. And so we're really looking at it from the infrastructure perspective, and looking at growing new industries, building new industries in the region, in the state, and being able to have those direct and regular and formalized conversations where we can lay out on the table those shared goals. So we're sort of needing to recondition a little bit and move forward now as quickly as possible, but with an immense amount of mutual, I would say, it was very clear, was mutual enthusiasm.
Yeah, if I can jump in there, Bill, I think,
Sure.
Bill, you alluded to this earlier in the conversation that, conversion of trucking to zero emission is an equity issue. It is an environmental issue. It is a racial issue. When you look at the communities affected by air quality along the highways in Southern California, around the ports, within the areas where distribution centers are, like, this is not just solely an environmental issue. It is very much a local air quality, health, and equity issue. And, we are extremely hopeful for the new federal administration, but I want to warn about potential complacency and a shifting from, okay, well, we don't need to do it. We don't need to have as much funding at the state level or as much focus. We can divert focus into other areas of priorities because it's going to be handled at the federal level. And that's not, written in stone yet. And I think, all of the targets and the goals that are being laid out by ARB and some of the rules that are being thought about and implemented, they have embedded in them this idea of incentive levels and everybody coming to the table and helping support because they're so massive. And so it's not just, yes, absolutely, federal support is 100% needed, and opening, bringing them to California with open arms. But we need to be putting the pedal to the metal at the state and local level still consistently. It's not a time to be complacent at all.
Well, it's a great point, Eric. And I think that it's essential for the whole country that California succeed in our advanced clean trucks rule and advanced clean fleets rule and making this transition. We have to show how it's done. And we've already got, New Jersey is going in that direction. I think other states will, and I hope ultimately the federal government, but they're going to be looking to California to see how to make it work.
Absolutely.
And along those lines, I want to get to another question from one of our participants, which is, how should regulators and program administrators engage the full spectrum of goods movement operators affected by the zero emission transition, including small companies? And I will add, in addition to small companies, communities, workers, everyone who's affected by this transition that we've all talked about is really challenging.
Yeah, I guess I can address that a bit. So, in terms of the first wave of rules, you're really talking about sectors like, the transit sector already has a zero emission requirement, airport shuttles, public utilities or utility vehicles in general, municipal fleets, refuse. So, you don't have a lot of smaller operators in those areas with the exception of airport shuttles. But as we get into first and last mile delivery, as we get into port drayage, that's where we're going to start running into a lot of those, smaller mid-sized entities. We do as much education and outreach as we can, through the association. I think most of the industry is aware that, things are moving forward. But really, it's just a lot of ongoing engagement with the ARB as far as what the plans are for the future. I think that there's still a lot of education and information exchange that's happening back and forth between us and the agency and the utilities and other folks who are going to be instrumental in all of this. And so, I think, as I had said in the opening remarks, we're just still all trying to figure out, what we're doing here. We're sort of moving fast and breaking stuff, as they say in Silicon Valley. And, the hope is that we all get a little bit smarter. And, Bill, I think we all agree we want this to be successful, not, sort of a high profile failure. I'd rather have a small, scale success than something that falls apart.
I think this, I'll jump in to say that, when turning to workforce development and workforce development programs for a second, one of the ways that at the Workforce Development Board, we're trying to really support the zero emission transportation transition is really, continuing to invest in what we call high road training partnerships and targeting those to specific industry sectors that of course have a serious impact on the climate and our air quality, such as transportation and trucking. And those training partnerships are really organized at the regional level. They're sector-based, so it engages more than just one set of employers, or more than one employer, I should say. And it really brings employers, workers, and their representatives, community groups, education and training providers, social service entities, a whole host of constituencies together to figure out collectively, with the folks who are kind of closest to the issues, what are the needs, what are the interests, what are the skill and training requirements as we transition to zero emission technologies. And so, continuing to invest in those kinds of training partnerships is one way to do this. And of course, to then have those training partnerships have more communication with regulators, program administrators, et cetera, so that we really are bringing together the folks who are addressing sort of our environmental and climate policy and public investments in those new technologies with the folks who are on the ground, who are tasked with sort of implementing and coming into compliance, and again, addressing a whole host of other issues that come up as every industry really is dealing with how to operate in a more carbon constrained economy. So, I'll just sum up by one word: partnership, and investing in those partnerships.
Thanks. We also had a question about, for those companies that could not afford new trucks, would they get support for purchasing a cleaner used truck? And I wonder, Nancy, does Calcap finance used trucks?
Yes, we do. Yeah. Probably the majority of what we do are the used vehicles, 2010 or newer.
So the answer to that essentially is yes.
Yes, there is a program out there already. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention also, we were talking about the federal government and not, counting on their funds. Although I'm very hopeful for the Green Bank Accelerator, if as the Green Bank of California, if we can get funds from the federal government, I can partner with different state entities to help promote their programs as well, and not just partner as an administrator, but with funding to go along with it.
Eric, if we can get back to infrastructure, we know there's a lot more infrastructure that we need. And should that be provided primarily by utilities like Edison, who have ratepayer funds approved by the PUC, or is there a role for other entities, and will they need incentive funds from CARB or the CEC?
Yes, all of it. I think I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads there. A little bit of sort of utility education here, which I think is really helpful for the audience. Traditionally, the utility funds capacity and system upgrades up to the edge of the customer site, up to the meter, and then the customer pays for everything on their own site. If you're installing EV charging equipment, the customer site upgrades, depending on how large the upgrade is going to be, could be double or 2.5 times what the utility side costs are. Now, when you start talking about the heavy duty trucking context, then it almost flips the other way around. But regardless, you're still talking about a lot of money at each site. And so programs like SEE's Charge Ready Transport, or a similar program that PG&E is initiating, are fantastic ways to have the utility fund all of it, both the traditional utility work that we would do anyway, and the customer side infrastructure. So that really reduces the costs for any site looking to install infrastructure. The challenge long-term is going to be when you've got, depots with 30, 40, 50 trucks, and they're each charging at really high speeds, 350 kilowatts, 1 megawatt. Now you're talking about massive installations that reverberate and cause impacts up the chain at the utility. And it's not so much a funding perspective, because we've got mechanisms to handle large load increases, but we're really talking about time. So for example, if you've got a large trucking site that requires 10 megawatts of load. Now, the numbers are not important, but that's a lot of potential load. that's going to potentially cause a planning process upstream to install new substations and new service lines that could take 7 years through permitting and regulation. And so now you're at a real disconnect that Chris alluded to in the very beginning in his opening comments around the timing, not so much the funding. Now, we are going to need funding support, I think, across the board, and that's going to come from a lot of different areas. But the big issue is going to be this planning and timing and installation. And there's several mechanisms on the regulatory front that we can use to try to front load that, or other areas. But this is a big issue that I think all the utilities, not only in California, but also across the country, specifically around announcements by Amazon and UPS, are beginning to think about and deal with. So we have a little bit of a runway before this market really starts ramping up. But I think it's less about a funding question and more about, how do we time everything out and how do we coordinate the infrastructure installations with vehicle incentives and grants, fleet planning and conversion, or even public fueling infrastructure. All of this needs to have an open coordination and communication because of the long planning timelines in the regulatory context, or just simply in the permitting and construction context.
If I could just align myself with the comments, because, on behalf of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, also a proprietary department of the city of Los Angeles, we see it the same way. There are significant incentives for heavy duty commercial charging that we have in place, and that we're supporting the port on, or the department is supporting the port on. The low carbon fuel standard is a crucially important program for us to continue to fund that infrastructure. But the department is super invested and excited and motivated and resourced to work on the build out of infrastructure in the region to really support drayage operations. This is also some of the planning work that SCE is also involved in through the Transportation Electrification Partnership that I mentioned earlier. And just know that for any other operators or potential partners out there, that the department very much wants to be a partner in that planning. It's helpful to start early to bring it for this type of infrastructure, to bring in the department early on in the process. It may make a big difference to decide to put something over here versus over there, just on where their internal infrastructure is. And so we really want to encourage and remind people that the department wants to be a partner in developing that infrastructure. We're very supportive of it, and just want to make sure that we can be doing everything we can to keep the doors open.
And in California's bifurcated system, a publicly owned utility like LA Department of Water and Power can move ahead with its board's approval, whereas the investor-owned utilities like Edison need the approval of the Public Utilities Commission. I'm wondering, Eric, is that PUC process moving quickly enough to meet this infrastructure challenge?
Right now, it's not. So the PUC has taken a lot of steps to help accelerate, and they've done, they're doing a lot of really great work in approval of programs and assessment of programs. But we have a regulatory process with intervener comments and other processes. And so I think it's on everybody to figure out where are areas that we can accelerate and still have the correct safeguards in place, and the PUC can still play its regulatory role as appropriate, but understand that there are timelines here that we need to figure out how to accelerate.
Well, I want to thank all the panelists for what I think was a very substantive and solution-oriented conversation, and really appreciate the input from everybody. I'm sure that we'll be continuing to have this conversation as California continues this major effort to make the transition to zero emission trucking. So thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, now it's my great pleasure to introduce Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara. Commissioner Lara was raised in East Los Angeles, and in 2018, he made history becoming the first LGBTQ person elected to statewide office. He served in the Assembly from 2010 to 2012, and then the Senate from 2012 to 2018, and currently serves as California's Insurance Commissioner, proudly leading the state's Consumer Protection Agency and overseeing the country's largest insurance market. I had an opportunity to work with Commissioner Lara when he was in the Senate, as he was an environmental champion, authoring laws promoting innovation and investments in clean air, embracing equity, protecting our coast, repairing the damage of oil drilling, and keeping California's global obligation to combat climate change. He served on the California Air Resources Board and was awarded the UN Climate and Clean Air Award with Governor Jerry Brown for his groundbreaking law reducing the short-lived climate pollutants. So, Commissioner Lara, it's great to have you with us, and please take it away.